The U.S. Interior Department released a report on May 11, saying at least 500 Native American, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian children died while in boarding schools operated by U.S. government. What's your comment?
我注意到了上述的报告。
I noted the report you mentioned. It confirms the tragic past of the indigenous children's torture in Indian boarding schools. The report also expects that continued investigation will reveal the approximate number of Indian children who died at federal Indian boarding schools to be in the thousands or tens of thousands. The report is a long-awaited one. Prior to that, the U.S. government had never kept statistics on the real conditions of those schools or verified the number of indigenous children who went to the institutions, died there, or were missing. In fact, the U.S. was very reluctant to admit the existence of the history at first and even tried to keep it in the dark. But the great pressure from indigenous community, the whole country, and even abroad eventually compelled it to look into the past and uncover the facts that shocked the world. The report shows that from 1819 to 1969, indigenous children went through unfair treatment, including whipping, sexual abuse, forced labor, and malnourishment, and more than 500 children died as a result. The U.S. is founded on the atrocious massacre and persecution of the indigenous population. The issue of Native Americans is the U.S. original sin, convicted by the Indian boarding schools. Native Americans used to be the dominant population in North America, which now accounts for only 2% of the U.S. population after massacre and eviction. The U.S. adopted cultural assimilation and occupied Indian reservation with forced separation and native children's resettlement. But the trauma a few generations have gone through persists even till today. Native Americans are still under discrimination with varying health and destitution. Among all the ethnic communities, Native Americans have the lowest life expectancy, the highest poverty rate, the highest rate of youth alcohol abuse, and the lowest community daughter-to-patient ratio. In 2019, about 25% of Native Americans lived in poverty, which is 2.5 times that of the national average. The dark history of the Indian boarding schools in the U.S. is only a tip of the iceberg of the problems of systemic racial discrimination and human rights issues. Racial minorities, including Americans of Asian, African, Latin American descent, and Muslims, still cannot breathe or gain security. Statistics from U.S. research institutions revealed anti-Asian hate crimes increased by 339% in 2021. From the Tulsa massacre to George Floyd and to Patrick Loyola of Michigan, who died of police violence, the list of African Americans dying amid the racial discrimination is only prolonging. People of Latin American descent, accounting for 19% of the U.S. population, only possess 2% of the country's wealth. Up to 93.7% of Muslims in the U.S. are living in the shadows of Islamophobia. The U.S. should fulfill its commitment of all men are created equal with concrete actions, adopt measures to truly help ethnic minorities get over their trauma. More importantly, the U.S. should learn from historical lessons treat the social endemic of racism and avoid repeating the human tragedies time and again.